hello to everybody out there. Yeah, it's a pleasure to come on today. As Pablo mentioned, been dealing with the CQF Institute now for the last 2 years, and yeah, I've been very impressed with the whole institute and the setup as well. So yeah, it's my pleasure to spend a bit of time this evening, hopefully helping and guide for you guys on the journey with your careers. So I'm just gonna start off just to introduce my PowerPoint presentation to you. So yeah, topic is how to build a standout quant resume, best practices. Um, so initially, Pablo touched on a little bit of it there, but I'll just give you a little bit of a brief introduction of myself. So yeah, 20 years experience in the financial services search recruitment industry. I set up my own company, which is Clarence George in 2019, to really offer a highly bespoke service to our clients within the insurance and investment markets. Since 2019, we've been able to double our, our headcount and treble our revenue within that space of time. And even that's through the tough years of the pandemic as well. So we're very fortunate that we work in a very, very good market with very prestigious financial services clients that we're able to recruit through those years. And we do source, the very best quantitative finance talent. The niche that we sort of really operate in is very much sort of life insurance, pensions. So tends to be cross actuarial investment and risk. And the companies we work with are in the UK, Ireland, Bermuda, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Plans are potentially to look at other markets as well over the next few years, potentially maybe Middle East and the US as well. So the current market overview, I think it's probably good to just maybe give everybody a bit of a oversight of what we're seeing. There's probably a lot of negativity out there in the press about future sort of recessions, high interest rates, all the rest of it. But certainly from our perspective, our main market is the UK, and it is incredibly busy for quantitative talent. That's the good news. Really busy at, I would call, the junior to mid-level of the market. And this would equate to probably analyst, associate, VP in banking, or sort of part qualified, newly qualified actuaries, CFAs, and CQFs. So it's a very big, highly sought after skill set in our market, and we're not seeing any sort of decrease for the demand for talent. At the most senior end of the market, and we may touch on this in the Q&A, it's a little bit quieter, and there's probably very specific reasons why our market's a little bit quieter. But at the very senior end, maybe sort of director MD, it is quite competitive, the London market. We're probably seeing a lot more of those opportunities internationally in the more emerging markets. We're also seeing maybe a bit of demand outside of our core area. As mentioned, we're very much life insurance, pensions, but we're seeing a lot of people move into sort of wider fields such as energy, tech. So it's something that I'm keeping an eye on as a company as well. That's something we may well necessarily expand into as that demand continues. So on to the key part. Well, hopefully you are all interested in today. It's actually the resume or the CV as we call it in the UK. I just wanted to start off to saying that your resume really is a very intimate and personal document. Nobody's resume is the same as anybody else's, and it is a very, very personal thing. So what I always say to people is that there is best practices, but it really is you as an individual, and it outlines your own experience and journey within your career. So there is no right or wrong really to what you want to describe about yourself, but there is some key things, certainly from a recruitment point of view. I think this presentation will hopefully demonstrate to you. So yeah, very much an intimate document. However, it's also the opportunity to really sell yourself to the hiring manager, or initially to probably the recruiter, somebody like myself, who is quite time poor, right? So certainly from my perspective, we see, lots of CVs on a daily basis, and so does line managers. So it's really about how do you get our attention and land yourself that interview. And what I'm going to talk about today is really the fundamentals of that. So just have a think about it. As I said, it'll be your own document. You will create it how you like, but it's really what to include. Sometimes more importantly, what not to include. The ideal length, the attention to detail, and style. So hopefully a few things to have a little think about. So fundamentals of writing a resume, what to include. So first of all, I would say we'd be looking at an executive summary or a profile right at the very top of the CV of the resume. And I would say the ideal length for that's probably 2 to 6 lines long. Keep it quite specific. Essentially, this gives the hiring manager a snapshot of your experience and why you were aligned to the role that you're applying for. And that's really, really important because that is the first thing when a recruiter, line manager looks at the CV, they will see before they decide to really read on. So yeah, it was just really that's a little bit of a picture of the company. There's a few more people now joined since that picture. Obviously, we talked about the introduction of myself, the current market overview. Now I was talking about really what we're just getting on to about what is the ideal sort of fundamentals to your CV and what's really, really important. And then we were talking now about the executive summary. So we're looking at that sort of real snapshot of your experience and why you're aligned to the role. So that's the key bit, and that's something to really have to think about as well when you sort of put that resume together. And sometimes that can be the most difficult bit, is about selling yourself. It's very easy sometimes to write down, the qualifications, the IT skills, the responsibilities, but sometimes it is that sort of, how do I get myself across in that sort of 2 to 6 line executive summary. The next part, we're looking at the responsibilities, and I also say responsibilities and achievements. What I normally find on most resumes is people are very good at writing the responsibilities, and it can be a long list of bullet points of responsibilities, which is absolutely fantastic. But what I'd say is you want to really think about some achievements in that as well. So I would normally advise people to have at least 6 minimum responsibilities and maybe 2 to 3 achievements. And you can break that up into subsections on a CV, because what people are really looking for is that add value. What is it that you've actually done? I'd say the day to day, the business as usual role, that will make you stand out from your peer group. So as I said, achievements don't need to necessarily be as long as responsibilities. Responsibilities will always be inherently longer, but just always think of it that way: responsibilities and achievements, and at least maybe 1 to 2 on the achievements. And again, it's about really thinking about what you want to put on your CV, because this is the sort of the bridge to interview, right? You can expand on this more within the interview, and it's really going to be something that would probably jump out in the CV, because people tend to glaze over a little bit responsibilities because they see the same thing pretty much on most CVs. What I would say is that, explain a little bit about the company that you're working for at the moment. Certainly, the CQF is a global qualification profession, which is fantastic. But I think what a lot of people we find is, companies can be very specific to certain geographies. And yes, if it's Shell or it's, British Telecom or Legal in General, Deutsche Bank, people will have a good idea of who those companies are. But if you work for maybe a small asset manager, family office, a company that's very maybe specific to the Asian market, it's really good to maybe write a couple of lines just under the heading of your company on your CV, and just explain a little bit about the size of the company, the locations. For our sector, assets under management is quite interesting. People like to know the size of some of these asset managers we work with, how many assets they're managing. And it just gives people a flavor in a different market of, oh, I can identify with that company because that's a similar company to something in our market. So we find we do get a lot of rejection on CVs. And then when we probe the line managers a little bit further, they've maybe made an assumption that they just didn't think the company was relevant to the sector they were in. So again, that is really fundamental in my view. And don't really assume that it's a big company everybody knows, because certainly Legal in General, I should just mention, one of the big companies in the UK we do a lot of work with, probably wouldn't be known too much in Asia, for instance, so it's just really about not making assumptions, really. Dates, very important. My advice is to be very, very upfront and very honest about any gaps in the CV. Some people can, try and hide them, but good recruiters like me see it. So just once you do this for 20 years, you can notice this. And look, a lot of the reasons are probably quite, mundane, like, traveling or what have you. But sometimes you don't get that opportunity if somebody just thinks you're trying to hide something on the CV to explain it in an interview. So look, I think always be upfront, be it maternity, paternity leave, redundancy. It happens. It's definitely best just to, even if it's just one quick line, just to make sure the chronological order of the CV flows. because if somebody sees a gap, they may just assume, look, I'm not going to interview that person. We won't even get to the reason why. Big thing I think for quants is the examples of stakeholder management and presentation skills. This is probably the best bit of advice that I can sort of give for a quant CV, because the CVs are always really impressive with regards to academics, meaning it's really impeccable. It's some of the best academics you'll ever see on CVs, and that's fantastic. Companies are great. But it's really, I suppose, what stands out is that stakeholder management presentation side of things. So having a think again about some sort of examples that you can sort of really relate within the CV, and that can go into both responsibilities or achievements. So that would be really, really good to really, really highlight that, because that's usually the common question that we get asked once somebody's interested in a CV. What is their stakeholder management like? What is their presentation like? Is this person, somebody we would like to bring towards forward to interview? So if we can get that onto the CV, that's really, really good as well. And the last bit, which we see probably a lot on CVs anyway, with the CQF profession, is the qualifications. But don't forget to put the classifications, the dates as well, because again, when people don't see that, they assume that maybe there's been, repeats, failures, people taking time out. So if you've done it really, really quickly, you've passed first time, really, really highlight that. And it goes back to selling yourself. A lot of the time, I can't believe people don't put first time passes on their qualifications. And I think sometimes they just assume everybody is passing first time, and that's not the case. It is a unique selling point. So really, highlight those really, really top academics as well, and the dates as well. And then probably what's on every quant CV, really what we see is the IT programming skills. Little bit of advice on that one. I would say we see a lot of Python or MATLAB, C# on CVs, but we don't really see the level of proficiency. So we do, in our sort of interview with our candidates, really drill into that to see where they are on that. Is it basic, intermediate, advanced, expert? So that would really help actually as well, that people would just be really good on that, to really sort of talk about what sort of level of proficiency are, because they usually are an expert in one or more coding languages, but maybe one is probably more sort of desirable than others. Certainly in our market, Python's probably out as number one at the minute, then closely followed by R. So it is really good to see that, because maybe some of our clients might not be too bothered with C#, what have you. So for every market, it's really good to just highlight that level of proficiency as well. And then I'd also say keep any sort of publications on there, but keep it succinct, because we do find certainly with PhDs, CVs can go on quite long with a lot of the research and stuff. And why it's really, really good in a commercial setting, people want people to be very succinct, especially in the CV, because they do get worried about, like, it's just going to be very much like a thesis, the CV. So it's good to mention it, especially if you think it's relevant, but we see a lot of people sometimes putting lots of subsections below it. I would say keep it on there, but you want to keep it very, very succinct coming into the commercial world. Okay, so the bit that I mentioned that what not to include, sort of just touched on it there. The publication side for quants is probably the big one. Just keep it relevant. A little quick story. I placed a PhD from Imperial a few years ago into one of my clients. His CV was like 15 pages long, and an impeccable PhD quant. And the line manager was basically not going to see the person, because they just felt in the job they wouldn't be, punchy enough with any sort of like reports in the business and what have you, and making it succeed. Fortunately, the role of a good headhunter, I was able to convince the line manager, look, he's just come out of academia, he's maybe not used to this. Long story short, we ended up getting them the job, and it was a real learn for me to say, look, we really need to say to our candidates, look, you're amazing academically, but for very busy commercial clients, we really need to keep it short and punchy on that side of things. And also what I tend to see on quant CVs probably more than most is a lot of graphics as well. There's a lot of like quite a color and logos, and maybe sometimes their own pictures as well. Certainly from the UK market, I can't really speak maybe too much outside of that, but certainly other markets as well, Bermuda and Hong Kong. Yeah, I think the professionalism is just, to leave it very much, just words really, and the logos really aren't necessary, and it really sort of distracts a little bit from the main part of the CV as well. Ideal length. This is the question we get asked pretty much every day. And I would say really we're looking at two to four pages is probably the ideal length of a good CV. Um, what we tend to find is either from the quant resumes, it's either going to be too short, one page, and people do get a lot of advice on that. So it'd be interesting maybe in the Q&A. And this goes back to there's no right or wrong, but I feel one page sometimes can be just a little bit too short to really be able to sell yourself. And then go back to the what I mentioned earlier, they could actually be too long as well. So it goes ultimately back to you've got a limited window to catch a hiring manager's attention. So really use it well. And I think that two to four pages is probably about right. I'd even lean to more 2 pages to 3 pages, really. But I'm always conscious that the more senior you get in the market, your experience may then fall into the third, fourth page. So probably does depend on level of experience. Also, as well, believe it or not, attention to detail. We do see a lot of resumes that have got typos, spelling errors, and yes, they may be quickly put together, but again, it's back to sort of it is a representation of yourself. So I would just say on that, you really get somebody to proofread your resume and get a second opinion, because sometimes we have a little bit of color blindness to our errors sometimes, and we in our business very much proofread everything through our colleagues before we do adverts online. And there's lots of things you just don't see with your own eye. And I would say that would be something to do. And it's a very quick thing to do. And just think about the formatting as well. Just be consistent with it. Sometimes we see different types of bullet points for every sort of job. Again, it just sort of just distracts it from the actual flow of the CV as well. So I just say be consistent with the format, and whatever font you want to use and things, just try and keep it consistent as possible. This is the suggested resume structure. Obviously, it's on one page to keep it for the presentation, but obviously this would fill out when you'd be putting in your executive summary, for instance, then your professional experience, your education, professional development, and then your skills, IT at the bottom. So that, hopefully would flesh out to 2-3 page CV once an individual would put in their experience into that. So again, you can keep it very simple, and that's the way I would do it. As I said, because you've got that short window to get the attention, and this is what we're looking for. And these are the key things that I would say that you really want to have on your CV. They're the really necessary things that people look for in that CV. So that's a little bit of an overview of that. The style and how to stand out. I would say you can develop a generic resume for yourself, which will be the basis for any application you make. It's really important to include really keywords within that document, because that is usually what certainly recruiters look for. So we get mandates that are looking for very specific skill sets. So, really just making sure that, we've got sophisticated sort of software here that we can do searches on CVs, and, we can search thousands of CVs very, very quickly, but we are honing in on keywords. So making sure that, you're not doing yourself a disservice by leaving something off the CV where you might not get that call from the recruiter. So just having to think about it from our perspective, when you've got lots of potential candidates and your time poor, and a hiring manager's looking at a shortlist by the end of the week, keywords would be the first thing that we go to, and then contact candidates that way. So just something to have a little bit of a think about. I would always encourage everybody to tailor your resume for each specific role that you apply for. So you have your generic CV, which hopefully is all encompassing, but really when you do apply for a role, you want to really ask the headhunter like me, right, Patrick, what is the top 3 key things the hiring manager, the person's looking for? And that's where we work together. And what we then do was bring that to the top of the CV and make sure that doesn't get hidden on the bottom of the third page. So it's just a little bit of, I suppose, presentation on that, really. It's not changing anything. It's not saying that you've done something that you haven't done. It's just really highlighted it, because, when line managers have maybe 20, 30 CVs, 15 minutes to review it before a meeting, they probably look very much at the top of the CV and it goes straight into the yes pile. And that's what we want. A lot of CVs go into the maybe pile. The maybe pile will always go to the no pile. It's just the way it goes, so they'll get the 6 interviews from the yes pile, and that'll be it. So that's what we want. We really want those keywords, and really standing out, but tailoring it very much to every specific application. Bring key elements back to the top of the resume, as I mentioned. including the programming skills, relevant qualifications, personal statement, profile summary, key achievements, skills that you bring to the role, what makes you stand out, anything that just gets that attention for somebody to read on a bit further. And ensure you're presenting yourself in the best light, going back to formatting, very important, demonstrates attention to detail. And your resume ultimately will drive the interview. So cover everything that you want to talk about in an interview as well. Okay. And then just finally, before we maybe move on to the Q&A, there's probably some common questions that I get asked quite a lot from CQF quants about the resume. So maybe this might cover a few of the main questions, but one of them is, I do not have the work experience. How do I make my resume more quantitative? So we might find people coming straight out of academia that want to get straight into the commercial industry. So how do you do that over somebody? And I think the key thing to do is to really sort of sell what you've done with regards in academia, because you probably have been programming using certain packages. And that's what a lot of our clients certainly are looking for. So we have a lot of people, getting jobs in the industry that we work in over people that have been working in the industry, 5-10 years. But because they're coming out of academia with the latest programming languages, and so that's the bit that really see it as that is your work experience. And really, you might want to use your university as your actual career bit, to be honest, instead of just your professional qualifications, and then have your responsibilities and achievements within that. So that's the most simple way of doing it, because that's what people are looking for. Second question would be, where do I put my CQF end project on the resume, LinkedIn? So my advice would be right at the very top. Absolutely. So really highlight that, because it's certainly a qualification now that is gaining a lot more traction. Certainly in our market as well, people are starting to recognize it, and it's a very prestigious qualification. So it really will make you stand out from a lot of your competitors as well. So don't be shy to actually highlight that, and absolutely you can have that really very much at the top of the executive profile. And then the final question is, well, I suppose that's what we just finished on, really. Can we mention that in the executive summary? And I say, yeah, definitely. And definitely don't be too shy to talk about if you got a distinction of your past first time as well. So great. So hopefully that helps. There was a lot in that. Hopefully you've got something from that, and now open the floor to some of your questions.
How are you doing? I'm Christian from the CQF team, and we have a bunch of questions that came through the chat for you already. So I'm happy to present a couple of them to you. First one is from Andrea, one of the participants from your talk today. Asked, Are there hints for those coming from different industries?
Hopefully, yeah. I think that's the thing is that from a CQF point of view, I would say it's really cross industry. Certainly where I started my career was very much actuaries, and they were very specific to the insurance industry, and they really didn't move across and outside of that. Whereas the CQF, it's very much seen across the whole. I'm obviously financial services, but you're seeing it across all the other industry sectors. So for me, if you're moving across a different sector and into another sector, it's very much using those transferable skills. So the CQF, what you've did and what is the interest you have moving into that next sector as well, because people will give the CQF people a lot more opportunity to do that than maybe other qualifications. But the key question would be.
And sorry to interrupt, Patrick, and I don't think that question was specific even to CQF. Just let's say somebody was coming from an engineering background and wanted to move into quant finance, so had some deep mathematics skills, and CQF obviously can help with that. But I think it was a broader question beyond just CQF delegates.
Yeah, well, if somebody obviously coming from engineering into our sector, what would massively help them would be the CQF qualification. So just coming straight from engineering into financial services would be very difficult, because the key question would be, well, what is the relevance? And I think with the CQF qualification, it's what you guys do in that, the project, the Python coding as well, which is what's the transferable skill within to the industry. So that would be the key, really. It's really just making sure that you'd have some sort of bridge within that, and that's what CQF would give, in my view, that they are committed to doing something that would be seen as not just specifically engineering.
So we have a bunch of other questions too. How much jargon is too much jargon for academic experience? I think maybe that's how the question was worded. Maybe just, how much jargon should you include in your resume? How to manage that?
Yeah, no, very good question, actually,
Yeah.
because it's difficult, right? Because you are very much, a product of your experience and environment. And I think that's the key thing, is you want to sell yourself, and you really want to obviously accentuate that in your CV, but always just maybe think about it from a lay person's point of view. So jargon, I get very much caught up in it in my market as well. And sometimes we get pushback from people going, sorry, don't really know what you're talking about there. So I think certainly that's the role of a headhunter, which hopefully we should be revising people, just to say, look, you might want to actually put, even from a CQF point of view, put the full title, because some people still won't know what CQF is, and maybe a link to that's the key, really. Anything that you feel that is just probably going to be something that, say, a layperson was reading the CV, make it probably as simple as possible where they could understand it, but that you're not going to get away from jargon, Christian, in certain sectors, right? But it's just having to think about it where it just doesn't become too much.
Yeah, and it's good to remember that the resume might be looked at HR before going to a line manager. Good internal recruiter is going to know
Yeah.
what key terms they're looking for, but just be sensitive to overdoing it. But sometimes you can't get around it to describe what you do.
Christian, just on that, and that's a phenomenal point. I mean, a lot of people might not be using headhunters at the start of their career, because we don't tend to work with people until they're probably getting to qualification. So a lot of people will make direct applications through LinkedIn and company websites. They will go to HR teams that are very generalist, who won't know the jargon.
Right.
So your CV might get rejected. So that's a fantastic point. You just need to think at the lower level. Your CV might not be going to a specialist headhunter, and it could be going to a HR generalist.
So we'll let James ask a follow-up question. So this next question is from James Crowley as well. What advice would you give a Canadian looking to start a career in quant finance in London? Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe location doesn't matter, but I thought that was an interesting question.
Yeah, come on over as soon as possible.
Oh yeah, Patrick Flanagan. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, look, we deal. I mean, a lot of our market, even in the UK, is international people. Canadians, South Africans, India. New Zealand. It is really, the markets that we work in. It's a really diverse market, and yeah, look, there's huge demand, and look, great for a Canadian. The language barrier is not an issue. Culturally, it's very, very similar. Our weather is probably not the best, but certainly, yeah. Look, there's huge demand. There's huge demand for global talent, and certainly, the earnings are still, from a London perspective, as good as anywhere really in the world as well. So there's very little, I would say, is probably going against it. And that is true, apart from our bad weather, and that's about it, really.
Excellent. So we have a bunch of questions. Fabian asks, is it worth having a GitHub profile with coding projects, side projects, for example? So it's something that we see on a lot of resumes, and so if you could speak to that, that would be great. So GitHub is a receptacle for a lot of coding, and I'm not a quant myself, so when I go on GitHub, like, it just looks like a bunch of math, which is what it is, right? So it's where a lot of people show their work.
Yeah, no, very good. Being completely transparent, that's something that I've never been asked before, and I haven't seen that on CVs. But it's something I'd like to have a look at, because part of Clarence George is very much we like to sort of see new things and innovation, and it could be something that I'd like to have a look at a bit further. So yeah, look, I wouldn't have that opinion on it, because I haven't really known too much about it. But if it's something that could be, included on a CV, I'd want to have a look into it a bit further. But it sounds interesting.
Excellent. So, and I know that sometimes I've heard stories of recruiters looking at GitHub profiles, looking for talent. I don't know how much of that is sort of like a folk story stuff, but yeah, that would maybe we'll get back to this crowd with an
Yeah.
answer on that. Okay.
Yeah. I think LinkedIn is really, certainly from our perspective, is the one of the really go-to areas of where people would, especially recruiters would be looking for people as well. So just being reminded that LinkedIn is still very much number one. So having to think about that's your online resume as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can post your projects there as well from GitHub. So that's, if you
Yeah.
have great work, show it on LinkedIn. So Toby has a tough question. This is another tough one, Patrick. Toby is an MSc student. He's currently dealing with a job search issue. I've not had success with my application. When I reach out to recruiters, the feedback I receive is that I don't have enough experience. Junior quant junior roles won't hire if you don't have at least 2 years experience. So he doesn't have 2 years experience. If I decide to get a job in engineering or data, I'll become less attractive to a recruiter years down the line. I guess he's saying for a quant role. How do I navigate this? Right? Sort of a catch-22 situation.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic question, and I really empathize because we do sometimes get a lot of people come to us like graduates, and the hard reality of it is our clients don't use us for entry level recruitment. They pay us for going out there and sourcing really in the main experienced people. So a lot of the entry level is usually direct applications to companies. So that could be graduate programs. And that's it, because I suppose there is a lot of headhunters that just don't, they just don't operate in that sort of level of the market. So we're the same really. Our clients just wouldn't come to us with that. That said, the CQF could be quite interesting because we find that even if people haven't got much experience, the programming language is nearly more important now for some of our clients than actually work experience. So I would always suggest is, we would definitely still like to see a really good quantitative CV, but it would be down to our client really. And the key thing would be for it to progress would be probably that the programming languages. So the best bit of advice I could give is it is going to be probably a lot of maybe direct applications to companies. But hopefully this presentation today will give you a little bit of a steer on what probably a lot of, maybe more generalist HR will be looking for on CVs as well. And that could be your way in, because it is a bit of a catch-22, fully appreciate it. You need the experience but you need to start somewhere. And I think that's the best thing I would do is, it is that sort of bit of a slog at the start to get that entry. But it will be a lot in the main, Christian. It will be a lot of, firms want to do this directly. So you will see LinkedIn and places like this, Indeed, full of those type of jobs. And it will be going into very much generalist HR people. So there is a lot of rejection, unfortunately. So it's about maybe trying to find out exactly what that company's about and really tailoring it, really really sort of doing a bit of homework. But I think a lot of people will just go out and send it to 20 places per week. It's probably not the best strategy. It's probably to send it to half of that, but to take a bit of time and really sort of gear yourself to that sector and hopefully get that interview.
Before joining the quant industry, I have worked with ed techs where I trained students for mathematical Olympiads and engineering entrance exams. Will it be considered relevant if I mention it on my resume? So there's a specific instance, but so these sort of quant adjacent experiences, maybe you could speak more broadly to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That sounds very, very impressive and quite unique. And this is what I'm going to is just having that little bit of, something on the CV that is not just what I would call the norm, which is what people see. But at the same time, keeping it quite, succinct as well. So looking at it as maybe a part of an achievement section on the CV would be quite good, because people are impressed with, that goes towards the stakeholder management, relationship management skills I was talking about earlier. And that is probably, if you don't mind me saying, guys, that's probably the one thing that we get pushed back a lot on the CQF quants is that, really needing to develop that. So if you've got it, absolutely, that would be a huge part of the sell on the CV as well. So I would very much encourage that, but it has to be succinct, and nobody would want that to go much longer than a couple of lines.
So we have, speaking of what's on your CV, a couple of very specific, very excellent questions about what should be included. Alex asks, is it worth putting hyperlinks in your CV since most people probably view them online?
Yeah, correct. Again, I think the hyperlinks goes back to the logos that I was talking about earlier. Again, does people really have the time to click on them? Not really, not really. And again, it's a little bit of a, sometimes it is a little bit of distraction from what you're trying to
Yeah,
say in your CV.
that's an excellent point.
So I would say, look, if it's something that, and again goes back to the very start of what I said, it's very personal, very intimate. And I don't want to diminish anybody's, it's a very visceral thing, a CV, right? And, if you're proud of it, then maybe consider one or two links at the very bottom of the CV in an other section, right? Where, it's just like, look, if you've got this far and you're interested, it's kind of like, well, look, I've got something else to talk about. But I think, again, if it's really in the main bulk or at the top, again, it can just distract and nobody really has the time to click on it. But look, maybe one or two links at the bottom, but not 2 pages of links. Again, it just, a bit like the PhD thesis is, it just gets pushed to one side, really.
I think that's an excellent point, actually, Patrick, because remember, the people looking at your resumes are people. And all of a sudden, another browser window opens, and oh, yeah, I have to check my bank account or do this or do that. You're giving the reader of your resume a chance to get distracted from the story you're telling. So that seems like great advice, putting it at the bottom. Severin asks, is a photo of the candidate on the CV a no-go? And as you're probably aware, Patrick, and specifically around the APAC region, that's quite common for people to put photos of themselves on their resume. Not so common in Europe and in the Americas, North and South America. But any thoughts on that?
Very much in our market, we don't see it too often, only really with international CVs. But I suppose it's worth mentioning to people that when your CV goes out from a headhunter specifically, it will go out in the format of the headhunter. So it'll be the same CV, but we will remove all personal details and very much won't be putting a picture on it because it's just a very much a UK people. I know in certain markets, I think certainly we see maybe Eastern Europe, it seems to be done maybe a little bit more. So again, it's very much jurisdiction. So look, I'm not saying if anybody's looking for a job in Eastern Europe or some other market, it might be the way it's done. But certainly if somebody's coming to the UK, yeah, maybe it's just we're a bit old and stuffy over here, really. We just keep it very vanilla, really. And as I said, yeah, it doesn't really, it's not really something that's really, valued or seen within the market, really.
Excellent. Okay. Lots of great questions here. So James asked an interesting question. How useful is networking in the quant field? I've seen that many companies pride themselves on being meritocracies. So is networking less valuable? So I'll leave the question. I'm not sure about the correlation between a meritocracy and networking necessarily, but maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I understand. I think I understand the question. I think hopefully I've got this right. You know, yeah, I think on the face of it, with regards to the sheer sort of academics, qualifications, and what you do in work, that should be a valid assumption. That should be enough for you to keep progressing within your career, and that's true to a certain extent. But if you really want to get to the top of your industry, networking is absolutely vital. So, yes, your academics, your intelligence, your programming ability, your technical ability will get you so far in your career. But what we find is we see a lot of people, hit a ceiling, and that could be at the VP level in banking. So it's like, well, why am I not getting the head off roles, the director roles, the C-suite roles? And that's what it comes down to, is networking is so good for so many aspects, really, because you by doing it, you're improving your confidence, your stakeholder management skills, and you're also getting yourself out into your industry, going to networking events, because a lot of people will be will be looking at you, and you might get a tap on the shoulder at those events where you wouldn't normally see a job on a website or through a headhunter, because there's a lot of panels, a lot of speaking. So sometimes people, especially in our sector, see it's very much the investment banking guys or the big four consultants that do that. But look, if you're in an insurer or a bank or an energy company or whatever it is, absolutely, absolutely. And it might not necessarily come naturally to you, but that's what it's about if you really want to get to the top. Because, for us, many years ago, I was sort of blown away by a presentation at an actuarial conference where it said the top 10 insurance companies in the UK. Not one of them was run by an actuary. So the CEOs were all ex, management consultants, bankers, accountants, lawyers. So actuaries within their own profession weren't even at the top. And the key message was because you haven't developed the wider business skills, you haven't developed, the wider acumen. And that's what the networking does. And it gives that confidence. So look, if you really want to push on and get to the top, and some people do, then it is really, really, really necessary to do that. If you're happy to stay sort of in a sort of junior to mid-level role, is it as necessary? No, not really. Not really. It's really if you really want to keep progressing really to the top.
Excellent. Right. So Patrick, do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, fire away. Yeah.
Let's go for it. All right, excellent. So for candidates from academic fields, and this is from Ruizi, I think she might mean who are fresh out of uni. Should the CV leave out any publications that specify on the subject outside the quant field, or is it okay to include them if they include quant analysis or highlight computing skills? If you want to type a little more sort of background on it, that would be helpful. But I think what the core of it seems to be, if you have publications that aren't relevant, directly related to quant finance, and you've been published in a journal here or there, should you include it if it doesn't speak directly to the role?
So I would say I'd be leaning to no on this. And again, you're just thinking about why is that why including that if it's it hasn't got that link, would you see it relevant to it? So it's really just going to take up a part of your CV that you may be better using for something that is more sort of geared to what you're applying for. And this is the bit where I said is you may have your generic CV where that's included on it, and but when you go for a role, I would say you really want to take out the bits that or maybe just filling it up that aren't really that relevant for it. And you're much better including something that would. So it might be, when you do understand what the company is you're applying for, trying to, really sort of get those sort of links that sort of you can cross-sell yourself into that company and use it for that. Because ultimately, if it's not really sort of relevant to what you're going for, then it's people will just look at it and just probably overlook it really.
Excellent. So Patrick, I'm going to end things by asking my favorite resume question. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of your presentation, so you might have covered this already. How long should a resume be? Should it be over one page printed? Are you allowed to have over a one-page printed resume?
Well, just for a bit of fun, actually, what would you say?
Me, I do try and keep it to one page. I have not worked on my resume in many years.
Yeah.
But in general, when I do look at a lot of resumes, not for quant roles. I do like it when it's one page. That's my personal preference.
Yeah, and this is exactly how I started the presentation. It's very much an intimate, personal thing. My personal preference is 2 pages.
Okay.
I think personally. So we're both probably in agreement it has to be succinct, right? So I think we're on the same page there, which is good. I just think one page, certainly because I deal with maybe more senior people as well personally. So I do a lot of MD level stuff. Can you really get your career across in one page? Can you really do that? Unless you have like maybe I don't know, Arial 4.5 typing, possibly, but that's not very good presentation, right? And that's what we're looking for as well. We're looking for good presentation. So I would err on just having that little bit more, and because, like I said, we will search on keywords from a recruitment perspective, and you might be just doing yourself a disservice where you just haven't mentioned that. And going back to what we say is, if I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with somebody putting a one-page CV across for a very, very tailored application. I'd be open to that. But again, I'd still be saying, look, is that enough? But So I would say, yeah, for me, in the presentation, I did the figure I put was 2 to 4, because it is very much dependent on the level of experience. So I think it would very much go, when you're starting out your career, definitely 1 to 2 pages. When you're mid to senior, possibly 1 to 3. A bit more senior if you're a CEO, that could then go on to potentially 3 to 4 pages. But that's really sort of enough. But there's nobody's ever, and it's very much a personal thing. Nobody's ever got a right or wrong answer to this. But certainly, what I can tell you is, if you start going past 5 pages, yeah, you're definitely doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, you're writing your autobiography at that point. So I'm not going to show my age by asking what resume paper to use, which used to be many years ago quite an important question, like the special resume paper, but that's not important these days. But I will say that it was thank you so much, Patrick. If you were all in the room right now, you'd hear thunderous applause, because based on the questions we're getting and the feedback already we're seeing from folks, it was a great event. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
look, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. And I think this is the bit that, I'm so impressed, with the CQF, people. They're phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And the big thing is, and this is why it's such a great opportunity, is we have these individual chats on a daily basis. And sometimes I do wish you could get out to a larger audience, because these are very fundamental things, and sometimes you just need to hear it from the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully, I really genuinely hope anything today, if it's just 1, 2 things you take away from this, you really, really get you that dream job. That would really delight me. So do let me
Great.
know.
Yeah, stay in touch with Patrick. And for those of you, hopefully those of you who don't have the CQF, this was, I imagine, still very valuable for you today as well. Final point, again, as Pablo mentioned at the beginning, if you're not a CQF delegate, you'd like to learn more about the program, visit our website. We're hosting an online information session on July 14th. So for those of you who'd like to learn more, you can do that. But at any rate, again, Patrick, thank you so much for your time today on behalf of the CQF team and all our attendees. And we'll see you all soon. Take care.